It gives me great pleasure to say we have with us today Shri Keki N. Daruvalla. Shri Daruvalla writes poetry and fiction and lives in Delhi. He also writes political columns in newspapers and has published volumes of poetry that begin with Under Orion 50 years ago in the 1970s and has since then published 12 volumes of poetry, the last of which was Naishapur and Babylon, 2008 published by 2018 published by Speaking Tiger. His main interest is fiction these days, and his 3 novels, For Pepper and Christ by Penguin 2009, Ancestral Affairs, HarperCollins 2013, and Swerving to Solitude. His first novel was shortlisted for the Commonwealth Fiction Prize in 2010. He's also written half a dozen collections of short stories, and his next volume will showcase his unpublished long stories from the crevices of the past. Shri Daruvalla is a retired Indian Police Service officer, and he retired as Chairman, Joint Intelligence Committee in 1995. He has received several awards, the Sahitya Academy 1984, which he returned, the Commonwealth Poetry Prize for his book Landscapes, and he was Poet Laureate at Literature Life 2017 and the Padma Shri. We're delighted to have you with us, Shri Daruvalla. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us at our poetry festival, Glass House Festival, Poetry from Around the World. I know you're reading for us out of 2 volumes today. I now hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yamuna. Well, I'm delighted to be here and read some poetry from my last 2 volumes and perhaps a poem after my last volume. May I start? I think I will. And the first poem I'm going to read is What Lights Up. And What Lights Up is a poem which I wrote after doing the Himalayas with a big gang, and we traversed the entire Himalayas, Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, and all the Indian Himalayas, right up to Kibitu, and later on to the Naga Hills, but the Naga Hills are not a part of the Himalayas. And I was asked a question when I finished with it, whether, well, it'll come in the poem, so I may as well skip it. What lights up? What lights up? The light bulb filaments of your recall, old man. This streak of fire through the thin wire of memory and mind. What line from which poet? The ibex looking down quizzically at our car from cliff. The crocked, sunning, corrugated hide on the banks of the Rapti as I cross the river, rolling on elephant back, wary elephant, treading riverbed like a mine, trundling diagonal across the current. And red-robed monks slowing down life, not through asanas, but with mumbled prayer that slow rolls the cylindrical prayer drum, and stars at their night shift in Ladakh. I don't remember the dripping, deciduous word leaf, holistic halfway through its never-ending fall from the tree of knowledge. And your eyes, I remember them bright as a window of a just lit room, seen from the cinder dark outside, the black moment, cinder dark, that was I at that moment. Isn't it sad? Not a bit. The spyglass getting hazed in the cold as it peeps into the mist and melancholy of the gone by Guzishta, Urdu word for the past, memory sabotaging memory, past subverting past. The next would be Gompa in Bhutan. It's a very short poem. At a Gompa in Bhutan, in the ear of the water sheep, cliff as backdrop, monastery in front, wooden facade, corniced, carved, painted, gold on door and drum, a sparrow hawk wheeling harmless in an innocent sky, overseeing red robes and tonsured heads, snow eagle sitting on a wire in the yard below, sedate as a llama, flat drums and the 9-foot trumpet with 3 joints have paid their hoarse compliments to the arriving dignitary. A dignitary was arriving at the Gampa, and that's what sparked the poem. I'm reading some poems which is a part of a diptych. 2 poems, going in pairs. And this is Lady by the River, and the next will be Lady by the Mist. She may not be beautiful, but she is still serene, though she doesn't look into mirrors anymore. She spots herself in the jawline and long eyelashes of her granddaughter. She doesn't face mirrors anymore, but she looks into the river now and then, the river which is so brown that it takes an era for her reflection to sink in. The boatman who has been ferrying her silks and her silken youth will not comment on her. The village women say, as she has stopped speaking to the boatman, but she talks to the river. And Lady by the Mist, she may not be beautiful, but she is still serene. Her hair may not be black or silver, but a remnant of luster still glazes it. The blue veins, once visible on her arms, are lost these days within the gradual darkening of her skin. Flesh may have receded a little from her face, but the bone doesn't show. Her gaze is far-seeing, eyes fixed on distance, reminds me of binoculars forgotten on the bank. Her long-lashed granddaughter looks at her as if she is river mist. That binocular, our team lost on the river bank, and 2 days back we came to the river and retrieved the binocular. Such things happen. Okay, this is the Maid of Orleans, Joan of Arc. So a part of the poem is in my novel as well, my second novel, where the husband and the wife, who are in Paris at the moment, quarrel with each other. She is in a black mood, in depression, and the husband tells his wife, don't see Joan of Arc. This is the 1929 film. And he said, any film on Joan of Arc will end on the stake. The reed fires or the other fires in which she was burnt. So you will get more depressed. But she decides to see the film, so does he. And, well, this is a poem on the subject. The Maid of Orleans. Any film on Jean d'Arc will end up on the stake, sur la bouchère, as the Burgundians who did her in, call it. If the film is just about the trial, disoriented, rustic lady, shorn of hair, abandoned by voices and visions, facing clerics made to look each in every inch like Mephistopheles, best not to see it. The camera and I are rustics. We can't identify Pierre Couchon, Bishop of Beauvais, who set her up for heresy and the stake. The fellow, despite his robes, could as well have been a commandant at Treblinka. She is not there on the ramparts, a whirlwind behind a banner, hurling the English back. The stake differs from film to film, but does it matter if she sizzles in reed and faggot or log and pine wood? Belief, heresy, and clerical chicanery are all a part of the plays. Look for the camera angles now as flames billow up, dense and delirious, and credits ascend the screen between smoke and starlight. I was in the Himalayas for about 7 years actually, and the Tehri town and the Tehri palace, Tehri Garhwal was a princely state and went under the dam, and one kept visiting it, driving around it, and here's the poem. Valley floor and flanking hills have gone under. Roof tiles are paved flagstones now and shimmer and refract whenever a light breeze smears the waters. The blur that is the temple spire is washed and warped. It trembles when the waters move. The palace too has gone down with its varied marble, color of sunsets, burnt sienna, though the pillars still hold the ceiling atlas-like, each pillar erupting from a carved stone lotus. It is if an underwater flute were activated, its Garhwal melody would gurgle up in a string of bubbles, and carp and mullet would scuttle away, thinking some water mammoth on the lake floor was breathing down their fins. There are enchanted waters now, mermaid and water nymphs, all breast and sinuous waist, move here. Flowering trees still drop petals. Kingfisher and blue jay sit on an underwater branch looking for prey. These are not waters, they are mist, memory. I look for your face, your shadow here, your body and your beer wrapped in waterweed. But the waters close in upon the outlines of your face, now beyond recall, and mist and vapor rub your smile away. Well, that does for Nishapuran Babylon, though I wanted to read one stanza from a sonnet on Orpheus and Persephone, but I'll leave that for later if I have the time. And now this is my, if I may call it, my magnum opus, the collected poems from 1970 to 2005. So 35 years, almost a lifetime has gone into these particular poems. And I'll start with living on hyphens. Living on hyphens. I should have named Night River after this poem, but I didn't. But all the reviews uh, carried this heading, Living on Hyphens. Living on hyphens, a man needs to anchor himself between dream and landscape, and between dream and the dark blood congealing on cobblestones, between hierarchy and disorder, between the slow rhythms of season and the frenetic pace of blood. A man must arrive at some sort of understanding. Some people are lucky. They function under two skies, a sky of feeling they instinctively possess, and a different sky of history over each separate past. I'm talking of bilingual poets in this particular stanza. Between the face and the mask that looks better than the face, between love for the land and hatred for the times, between the smog one lives in and the hope one lives on, a man, a woman must come to an understanding. But happiness lies in the familiar. In the penumbra, one can sense, not suit from the heavens necessarily, and the grit encrusted air, but yesterday's blue space still pulsing with yesterday's light and radio signals. Happy with just one boxed in sky, one feeling love, one sense of loss, one window, despair. I end sometimes rather bleakly, but of late I've tried to keep the bleakness away. And a very, very short poem on insomnia. Here we go, just 8 or 6 lines. A cricket lashed the night with its consonants. One passing car left its shadow patina on the window, suggestions of a flickering reality. Desires gravelled through the hourglass, and intermittently he heard the clock of his passions chime. Yes, I come to the fragments. Well, one is a love poem, and I'll read it here. Fragment. The heavens blue was in her eyes. He stammered when he met her first. 2 weeks they moved, hand touching hand. Just once his lips encountered hers. He groped above her waist and found, but her drawing back and knew he had lost. Despairing gazed into her eyes, one blue with sulfur, one with frost. And the last line, I tried to bring out that the woman, even though she was drawing back, one blue with sulfur and one with frost, she, half of her was caught with desire, but she resisted and drew back. And the next is Oslo fragment. I went to Oslo. I was in England those days. I was 3.5 years in England as Minister Consular to the Indian High Commission. And I started asking myself, what am I really doing here? I'd gone for work. And I walked on the banks or the shore of the sea and thought the thoughts for the poem came. I mean, You don't just sit down and start. It's not landscape painting or not the street artists. I have great respect for them who sit down on the street and start painting. Poetry has to come later, and it did. Oslo fragment. These nightmares did not thresh his blood. Blue eyes, blonde beards, long burning hair, and dragon brows, all too remote to cause an archetypal scare. I'm thinking of the Vikings, if you don't mind. Lost in the driftwood of this language, at every turn he came across two intersecting linear strips, the natives here called the cross. Walked gingerly along the shore, charred seaweed strewn, dark mermaid hair. He paused a while to ask himself what he was really doing there, scared of slipping over edges, brittle iced and furred with moss, and triggering into startled flight, a hoary, wide-winged albatross. I must tell you, it's a confession that when I wrote the poem or when I went to Oslo, I did think that the albatross was a sort of a mythical bird, but the albatross is very much a bird of those lands. I start with something not very bleak. After all, if you are dealing with the Black Death, in which about 150 million people died, so it was much worse than what we are going through with the corona, you have to be dismal. So when I come to the poems, the sonnets actually, the Black Death sonnets, but I have a prologue to them. And the first one is the devil writing a poem. And they are known as prologue to the sonnets. All right. The devil never left Black Death in the foyer to be discussed at length in devastating detail. Cleverer than Satan and Iblis, those soul sawyers, he couldn't ever fail. He checked out of Hilton. Memory had him dismayed. Didn't the hotel echo some rhymester of yore? Yes, of course, the guy who needed hearing aids, his verse sonorous as a river gorge. Having planted Brexit, the devil thought of exits, made a run for through, though sad to leave Hilton. In poor English, he said, "This place is truly gala." His task severe, bury memories of Black Death in some catafalque beyond the reach of sonneteering bums like Daruvalla. Thank you.
Sir, I must say, I loved that. I loved it. It was fantastic. Thank you so very much for sharing with us through all of like the lockdowns and you know, I knew there was some slight tech difficulties. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. We've loved hearing you. I have been clapping away every time I was terribly moved. So it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure all of the participants are going to really enjoy this session. Thank you again.